Hello. Inviting my friend, Dr. Jamie Marich, to join. I think she's here.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Oh, it's so lovely to see your face.
so lovely to be seen and to see your face. It says we're connected.
Yes. So, this is actually the first time that we've spoken to each other like live, voice to voice, even though we've been messaging and sending each other voice messages. So, would you please, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Marich? Jamie
Yes.
Marich?
So it's interesting, and I will explain the story because you billed me with the proper Croatian spelling of my last name. So my family's from Croatia and Eastern Europe, and we
Yeah.
would say Maric in that language.
Yeah.
However, in English, it's generally been trickled down as Marich, Marich, or Marich. And in my family, we can't even agree on how to say it in English. So I like to joke that that's evidence of our dysfunction that we can't agree on an English pronunciation. So Marich is fine in English. But for those of you who are wondering what the little check mark means over the C, a little while back, I decided to make my personal social media that, honoring my ancestors. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you so much for the explanation. I love it. Love what you're wearing. Okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited to see you, but let's get into it.
I know. I'm so excited to be doing
Yeah,
this.
me too. So thank you to all who are joining us. I'm very excited to see all of your names pop up as well. I'm Anna Holtzman. I help people recover from chronic pain and other nervous system stress related symptoms. And I do that in two different but related capacities.
Oh,
One is as
great.
a licensed therapist in the state of New York, and the other is as a coach who works with folks all over the world, remotely. And I'm here with my friend and colleague who I'm speaking to you live with for the first time, Dr. Jamie Merritt. And I'm also here with the book that she recently published,
Oh,
Dissociation Made Simple, which I'm very honored to be cited in. So excited to have this book in my hands. And would you like to introduce yourself too?
sure. So talking about you being cited in the book, yes, my most recent professional accomplishment is writing Dissociation Made Simple. And I did that as a person who wears two hats, that I'm a professional, I'm licensed in the state of Ohio, specialist in trauma and dissociation. I'm also a person with lived experience, having a dissociative disorder myself, dissociative identities. And yes, I was honored to cite you in the book because how I first found out about you was your article on the memory wars that came out a few years back during the Harvey Weinstein trial. And I just am such a fan of that article, and you did it so comprehensively and so well. And I shared it far and wide then. And when I went to write the book, I just felt like if you want to know this history, this backstory, check out this article. So yeah, we connected on social media, and I was
Yeah.
delighted we like knew who each other were, and we've just had some amazing conversations. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically me in a nutshell. That anytime I advocate, anytime I speak, I do it as both as a professional and from my lived experience. Although I would say in recent years, especially now that my professional credibility has been established, which is I know a lot of what we're talking about, the me that is just Jamie underneath all of these professional layers really has a lot to say about the profession and how we do healing.
Yes. And oh my gosh, I already have so much stuff to say. I'm like, okay, we've got to form this into the conversation
Yes.
we plan to have. But um, I'll just briefly say that one of the things that I love so much about working in the chronic pain
Mm-hmm.
realm is that most of the practitioners working in that realm speak openly about their lived experience of
Mm-hmm.
chronic pain as
Mm-hmm.
part of the work that they do and part of the educating that they do. But that is so very much not the case when it comes to most of the rest of all the, wide variety of ways in which our life stressors and traumas and experiences can impact us in the realm of mental health, there's so much stigma around bringing that lived experience in, and it's really to all of our detriment, I think.
Yes, and I'm making an interesting comparison in that I really came into the field primarily through the addiction lens first, the addiction treatment lens, because I'm also a person in long-term recovery from an addictive disorder. And in the addiction treatment part of our world, speaking from lived experience, I think largely because of the heritage of AA and one alcoholic helping another, sharing lived experience has been a lot more tolerated on the addiction side of things.
Yeah.
And so once I went to graduate school and got licensed as a mental health counselor and started working more in mental health circles, it was like, don't talk about yourself so much. It was the kiss of death to do that. So even one of my books I wrote, which was on addiction, the publisher was, you're getting too personal here. You're getting too personal here. And so, yeah, I've been having these kind of debates and discussions for a while about what's too much, but the other side of that is what's not enough.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe I'll launch in with the reason why I reached out to you to talk about this topic that we're talking about today, which we're calling gatekeeping in the mental health professions, licensure, certifications, etc. And it's a topic that tends to be on my mind a lot. I know it's on your mind a lot because I hear you and see you talk about it, on your Instagram page and elsewhere. But the thing that brought it, freshly into my mind most recently is that, as I mentioned earlier, I wear two hats, one as a coach and one as a therapist. And so I recently was having a conversation with a lawyer who was advising me. He's someone who specializes in the mental health field. And we were talking about how legally it's very important to separate and distinguish between coaching and licensed therapy. And that according to the law, and this really this really gets my gears going. According to the law, a licensed professional is allowed to say that they can help someone actually reduce symptoms of a diagnosable condition. And with that, I think it's, I don't know, my interpretation is that only a licensed professional is actually allowed to help someone reduce those symptoms, right? Whereas a coach is not allowed to say that they can help you reduce symptoms. They're not allowed, in theory, to help you reduce symptoms. So to me, this is just preposterous because, I wear both hats. So many people, more and more people in the mental health field are wearing both hats these days. I happen to know particularly about the chronic pain niche, and it's become very popular to wear both hats, not only for psychotherapists, licensed psychotherapists, but also for licensed physicians. And one of the many reasons for that is that the licensure limitations, they really limit who we can help. According to my license, I can only help people who reside in the state of New York. And there are people all over the world who need, of course, support with chronic pain. There are not a lot of practitioners out there compared to the number of potential, people needing help. So it limits who we can help. And it also limits who's allowed to help. I mean, I know a ton of people in the chronic pain niche because I've been in it for a little while. I know that there are so many people who have the knowledge, the empathy, the experience, the skills to help people, and a ton of them are not licensed professionals. So, what are we doing here? How is this helping people heal?
Yes. So let me ask you a question, because I get this question all the time, and I'm curious to get your take on this based on what you just said. In your elevator pitch, what would you define as the difference between professional counseling and coaching?
Okay. I'm laughing because my take on this is, it's my personal opinion, and it's definitely controversial. But I kind of love saying this because I like to, what is it? Ruffle feathers.
I don't like controversial at all. I don't know what you're
Yeah, I
talking
know.
about.
That's why we were attracted
Go,
to each other's
yeah,
work.
go for it, Anna.
Right. So in my opinion, the difference is marketing.
Mm,
It's it's a legal differentiation, in my
hmm.
opinion. It's a marketing differentiation. When
Right.
you market yourself as a licensed professional, there's a lot of authority and trust that gets built in
Hmm.
automatically because
Hmm.
folks have been trained to trust the licensure. When
Hmm.
you market yourself as a coach, there's less overall kind of general public automatic trust. And so you've got to lean on other things like your lived experience, like your facility with marketing and social media and that kind of stuff. Um, my definition of the difference is certainly going to be different from
Hmm.
probably most people's in the field.
Yeah, and I wanted to share my take on it as well because admittedly, this is where I'll admit I have a little bit of an edge around the word coach or coaching as a service.
Yeah.
I mean, they're amazing coaches like you and so many people I've networked. Yet, it's also a wildly unregulated world where anyone, even though there's coaching certifications and whatnot, I know we're going to talk about the certification thing, anybody could hang out their shingle as a coach, which on one hand may not be a bad thing because what do you really need to help others heal but lived experience and et cetera. Yet on the other hand, I've seen a lot of coaches that I think do manipulate the marketing game and don't necessarily have the backup and qualifications. So it's interesting because I also do dual services. Like I
Yeah.
am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Ohio. I also work as a consultant. So a lot of that consulting is educational for people who are pursuing EMDR certification, but I also write up a lot of my services as consulting when folks internationally do want to work with me.
Yeah.
And the big distinction that I was taught to make, and again, this is from an Ohio perspective, so I encourage everybody to check out the laws and regulations and what things are in your state. So in Ohio, the definition of counseling, professional counseling, it's very simple: diagnosis and treatment of mental and emotional disorders.
Mm.
Diagnosis and treatment of mental and emotional disorders. So if a person approaches me and it would be more appropriate to work with them under a consulting lens, I will let them know that with really the idea that I'm not diagnosing you with anything. If someone else has diagnosed you with something, it'd be fine if you disclose that. Yet the focus of our work will largely be on solution. And that whole idea of treatment to me is very open to interpretation. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'm not opposed to people calling themselves coaches at all. I'm just kind of admitting some of my concerns that have come up with it. And I know that like in Ohio, because I've had a lot of conversations with our board about various things, their line will be licensure is in place to protect the public. Because when Roe versus Wade was overturned last year, I contacted our board basically saying in Ohio, which is a pretty backward state around abortion law
Yeah.
right now, what is the board doing or what are their plans to protect their licensees if it comes down that we're going to get in trouble for aiding and abetting abortion, essentially? And the response from the board director, who I've had many candid conversations with, is it's not our job to protect our licensees. It's our job to protect the public. And that struck me as just very, ew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
that's their enduring line that they use, that licensure is there to protect the public, to protect the public. Yet even that makes me a little unsettled at times.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about all this. And
Yeah.
admittedly, like, I like to go the controversial route just because I think, partly because it's fun, but really because I think it's important to like just critically question all these things that we're told to just accept as the way things
Mm-hmm.
are. Um, Regarding the difference between licensure and coaching, yeah, I was being a little simplistic by saying the marketing. I mean, the other
Mm-hmm.
very obvious thing is that licensure means you've completed a set of requirements, and that
Yeah.
includes educational and experiential requirements. Saying you're a coach um,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean anything at all. Anyone can legally
Mm-hmm.
say they're a coach. On the kind of other side of that argument, I would say that licensure probably doesn't mean a lot of the stuff that the public thinks it means.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can get a license, like anyone can get a license if they go to the requisite, take the requisite number of years of school and work for the requisite
Yes.
number of hours. It doesn't mean they're working well or
Mm-hmm.
ethically
Or
or
have done their own
or
work.
have done their own work. It also, I think this is the part that would probably shock folks when it comes, I only know what my licensure track was
Mm-hmm.
like. We go through a period of working under supervision. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who haven't done this, including myself before I went through the process, think that that means there's someone literally watching you work and
Mm-hmm.
commenting on how you work with clients.
Mm-hmm.
But in my uh, in my supervision experience, that certainly wasn't the case. When I was with clients, I was behind a closed door. The only thing
Mm-hmm.
that was supervised was what I would tell my supervisor happened.
Right.
And obviously I was doing it with, trying to do things ethically and work on myself to get better. But I could have been in there talking about Donald Duck with them, for an
Right.
hour for all anyone knew.
So here's where I'm going to get edgy and controversial, because yes, to get, and this is for people listening in who may not know this, to get licensed in any state as a mental health counselor, social worker, marriage, family therapist, psychology requirements can be a little more rigorous. Basically, you need a master's degree. And for some states, it varies how many hours of a master's degree program you need. Like back when I was in school, it was like 32 in Missouri, but 60 in Ohio. So it could be very different state to state. And then part of that master's degree would include a practicum, an internship. And then, yes, once you get the master's degree, in most states, you have to work for 2 to 3 years under supervision. And so I get asked a lot by people. I mentor people in my world. Well, I want to be a counselor. How do I do it? I want to be a social worker. How do I do it? And I explain to them what I just explained to you. But even as I do that, like, I get this kind of nails on chalkboard because, and there's always exceptions, but I don't think most graduate programs are giving really quality education for what people need to be doing this work. And somebody who I think is even not listening to this live class right now is somebody I've had these conversations with. And I've told her several times, I think you might be sharing your gifts more doing what you're doing under the auspices of coaching or consultation and teaching than putting yourself through a 2 to 3 year educational process and then another 2 to 3 years of supervision, which is a period that soul sucks a lot of individuals. The only way I got through it was really, this is not going to last forever. This is not going to last forever. But there are a lot of abusive supervisors who are part of this gatekeeping. And here's the sad thing, and this is where some of my ethics around capitalism have really come up and challenged me. Like, I run a training program in EMDR, Institute for Creative Mindfulness. And the whole reason, Anna, I have a successful company is because graduate schools don't do their jobs correctly, because graduate schools don't equip their folks to work necessarily with trauma.
Agreed.
And yeah, yes. And then obviously to pay my faculty, to pay expenses, we have to charge a fee of some kind for the program.
Yeah.
And it's like, who are we charging? But people who are coming out of graduate school, usually with mountains of student loans, who may not really get what they need in the graduate school process anyway.
Yes. So I would love to speak to that from the student side, because I'm not I'm not a trainer, but I
Right.
obviously was a student. And like fairly recently, this is about my 4th or 5th career. So I graduated in 2018, I think. The program that I went through, which qualified me to become a licensed mental health counselor, which I am now, that program did not include a single required course on trauma. There was one trauma elective that you could choose to take or not take, right? So my feeling was, what are we actually, how does this education actually prepare us to help folks with symptoms of what?
Right.
What are we actually talking about here? the requirements, and I'm not saying all of the required courses were
Right.
useless, because that absolutely is
Agreed.
not my
From
opinion.
my, yeah.
And I had some wonderful professors, learned, some really valuable stuff. However, when the requirements do include a class on the history of the profession of counseling, and it's all about committees and like who was on the committee, and it does not include a requirement on trauma
Mm-hmm.
at all,
Yes.
um, there's like something wrong with the picture here, in my opinion. And a question for me comes up, which is licensure really about protecting the clients or the patients, or is it about power hoarding and authority and gatekeeping, to use, the word that we started with?
So I'm going to say something that's even more controversial and
Great.
potentially shitty,
I love it.
right? But I think it gave me tremendous, tremendous insight years back. So there's that axiom that those who can do and those who can't teach, which I don't necessarily agree with, because there's so many brilliant teachers out there who are practitioners and vice versa. But a few years ago, well, this was many years ago now, when I was dealing with the board in my state about getting some of my more holistic coursework approved for continuing ed, I went down and had two separate meetings and with the state board about, is yoga and dancing mindfulness legitimate for continuing ed? And in both of those experiences, I modified that axiom. Those who can do, those who can teach, and those who can't do either sit on regulatory boards to try to tell the rest of us what to do.
That sounds right to me. And not that I have much personal experience with
Yes.
regulatory boards.
And I also want to preface, I realize there are exceptions to this. Yet, I put this tweet out on Trauma Therapist Rants many years ago. I would estimate, Anna, so I've been in the field going on 20 years. I've been an educator about 15 of those years, running continuing educations and trainings. I would say in all that time, I have spent probably a fourth to a third of my time fending off bureaucracies. And I don't mean like for getting into trouble, just the ordinary stuff you have to do to get CE courses approved and your licensure paperwork approved. And I mean, as an organization, we're listed with 4 CE boards, we're MDRIA accredited, we have to do all this red tape paperwork with the VA and DoD to get some of their employees. So I even as I say that, it almost burns me up how much time I've wasted. And almost anybody who I would share this with in those organizations would say, well, it's for standards, it's to protect the public, it's to for quality and all of this. And I've said this too, there has to be some middle ground between assuring for some quality and standards and not being overly dictatorial in the way that we gatekeep as professional organizations. And what's that really about,
And gatekeeping, it is, I mean, it is a form of power hoarding, right? Or it
Yeah.
has that aspect kind of baked into it. And power hoarding can so easily be used for nefarious purposes. And it kind of, I mean, this is really pulling in a huge topic that, deserves like 12,000 different conversations on its own. But it does make me think of the topic of that essay I wrote that you referenced in the book, which was largely about the issue of incest and how it's been treated in the mental health field, how it's been suppressed because it's such a politically charged issue.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with patriarchy and the power of adults over children and just all of those hierarchical power structures that are baked into our culture. And those who sought to silence this issue, that's like the prevalence of incest as a trauma that causes symptoms that then wind up in the offices of mental health professions, those who sought to squelch this issue created all of these legal dangers, really, for mental health professionals, like all of these litigious traps, where if you even dealt with that issue with your clients at all, you could be subject to a lawsuit. And part of the purpose of licensure boards are, can be to enforce those kind of fear tactics, or
Mhm.
it can be used in that way.
Yeah, and as you know, a lot of my work is mentoring, consulting other professionals who do want to come out more publicly in forums like this about their lived experience, not necessarily coming out with clients, although sometimes that's a part of it, but they want to advocate on social media. They want to. And the biggest fear I hear articulated is, what if somebody turns me into the licensure board?
Yes.
I'm going to lose my livelihood. And I want to honor all of those fears. And I realize as I say this, I am saying it from a tremendous place of privilege as somebody who is established. I don't think I would have been this flippant about it at earlier points in my career when I really needed that license. And
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, and you could read about this if you're interested, folks. In Dissociation Made Simple, I did have a meeting with my licensure board in Ohio about, like, is this fear founded that people have? And the thing is, in Ohio anyway, overall it's not, because to really get a license taken away, there has to be legitimate evidence of wrongdoing that was done to a client.
Yeah.
So they've even said, and I believe this, that we're kind of trained to sniff out these kind of witch hunt complaints that they get from disgruntled ex-partners or from disgruntled ex-employees or employers. Like, you know, they have dissociative identities and whatnot. Yet that fear is still so, just this fact that fear comes up. I remember years ago, a friend of mine called me in the middle of the night because there was an issue of her license being complained against, and the investigation was, you know, definitely came out in her favor. But just that months of threat leading
Yes.
up to it. And like, I had a ding on my license for a paperwork issue with a supervisee of mine. And I took responsibility for it, because it's like, yes, I got lax on the paperwork, and it really showed me that I shouldn't be supervising with everything else I have
Yeah.
going on in my career. Yet, yeah, that like has a mark on me now forever. If you look up my license on the Ohio board, right?
Yeah, and here's that, like, I love that you're talking about this, because I think what, you know, there the things that are debatable, like, is it really a threat? Is it not a threat? All that stuff. But I think what's unquestionably true, because I'm hearing you talk about it, I talk about it with, you know, my peers and friends and colleagues in the field, is there's a lot of fear mongering
Oh,
that goes with licensure. I mean, it's huge. It's very prevalent. And honestly, like, even though there's no tangible reason for me to be worried about having my license revoked, I just feel it in the background when I'm working with my therapy clients
yeah.
and doing my therapy and my notes for those sessions, and, you know, you know, make outputting the super bills for insurance and all that stuff. There's something that I feel about it in the background that I don't feel when I'm working with my coaching clients. It's just a
Agreed.
felt sense. And
Agreed. Same with me in consulting.
yes,
Yep.
and I hear so many of my colleagues talking about this, so I know that I'm not alone. I know you're not alone. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
this is a thing. Um, and what's been so interesting to me as I've gotten into the chronic pain work is this idea that's central to the way that I've learned to work with chronic pain, which is to conceptualize pain as the nervous system, one of the nervous system's danger signals. It's a danger
Mm-hmm.
signal. And so fear is a very impactful trigger for chronic pain.
Mm.
Fear. And if you are just constantly in the background, but constantly inhabiting this fear of, like,
Mm-hmm.
getting in trouble, that is impacting your
Yeah.
own mental health and state. And then if you are inhabiting that while you are holding the container for your client, that comes into the work. It just does.
Yes. So this is bringing up another area of discussion, in that many people in my world who've taken trainings with me and who I follow on social media, who are licensed clinicians, trained in modalities like EMDR or somatic experiencing, are going the way of coaching, because
Yeah.
there's this frustration with dealing with insurance, which is very real, dealing with a lot of these gatekeeping systems, which is real. And I certainly applaud these efforts, yet I think part of the ethics around access that we also have to discuss, if many of us go this route, is, are we doing things like sliding scale access?
Yeah.
Because not everybody can afford a coach. But the thing is, even with therapy, not everybody has insurance to afford therapy either. And there's just so much tied up around a lot of that. Yet it's this interesting point about access, right, through insurance, that even gets used as a fear-mongering tactic.
Yeah.
Without getting into too much sub-detail, there's a lot of controversy in the dissociative disorders community now about how the professional organization that has usually spoken for us doesn't really get our community. And even as I've challenged some of those leaders in the community, it's like, well, we have to have the scientific empirical data to make sure that DID and dissociative disorders continues to get covered by insurance, and XYZ. And my counter to that is, yes, insurance wants the evidence-based, peer-reviewed, all of that. And even so many of those terms are just inherently colonial in nature,
Yeah.
are rooted in white supremacy, because quantitative inquiry is inherently something that is Western and supremacist,
Yes.
where the dissociative mind is something that is qualitative and can't easily be put into numbers or models. And I do applaud the efforts of those who have tried in their role to get us more acceptance. I think it has helped. Yet to continue to use that as like, but you have to show the numbers, you have to show the research, has to be. I mean, that term evidence-based practice has gotten so abused in
So
our field.
abused. I have
Yeah,
such an
I want to
issue with
hear
it.
about your tinglies with that. Something came
I
up for you
have
there.
such big feelings about that, because I'm not saying that, you know, research studies and evidence don't have their place and
Mm-hmm.
usefulness,
Right.
but they are so weaponized and so
Yes.
used to uphold white male supremacy, because who has the status and clout and financial backing to, get their intuitive methods proven
Mm-hmm.
with these studies? It's mostly
Yeah.
the old white guys. I mean, that's just what it
Yeah.
is, right?
And I've I've done some soul searching around this, that because I'm not an academic affiliated with an institution, research would by and large be something that's on my own dime. Research would be
Yeah.
something that I'd have to collaborate with other organizations in doing. That would take my time away from clinical work and writing and teaching and advocacy, which is where my real gifts are at. So
Yeah.
once again, I'm not advocating for any extreme, but I think there's a balance here, that the
Yeah.
people who do the research can do the research, yet it's the pedestal it's put on, the
It's the
supremacy that it's
pedestal.
put on, that concerns me.
It's the pedestal. I 100,000% agree. And it's the privileging of data over lived
Lived experience.
experience, which is
Yes, this is
just, it says
mm,
so much about just our culture in general, because the whole idea that data is more reliable or meaningful or important than lived experience is
mhm.
dehumanizing.
Specifically quantitative
Yeah.
data, because lived experience is data, it's information, it's inquiry.
Yeah.
And yes, I just so many agreements here with our experiences. So the other part of this, I we're inevitably already starting to talk about, is the supremacy layer, is the cultural appropriation layer, because
Yeah.
a big feeling that I have and I've written about is the gatekeeping that happens with certifications.
Yes.
Because I want to explain also to the audience who may not be aware, the difference in between licensure and certification. So you can get licensed in your state and never do an optional professional certification. As long as you keep up your 20 to 30 hours of continuing ed every 2 years, then you're considered good. But so many of the specialties now, like you can get certified as a trauma professional, you can get certified as a grief specialist, you can get certified as expressive arts therapist, you can get certified in EMDR therapy, certified as an expressive arts practitioner, IFS, all of this. And yeah, so after I got into the field for a minute and started pursuing some of my certifications and even looking at becoming a teacher, it's like, oh, all a certification is that some body of authority says you have met their standards and paid their money to meet their standards in order
Yeah.
to get this piece of paper, right? And I mean, I say this, I've said this on my TikToks, as a professional who owns a training company where I offer one certification, two certifications technically, and it is not in my business interest to be having this conversation. Yet
Yeah.
we have to be having this conversation because so many, especially young therapists who are eager and who want to help, feel they have to get every certification that's out there.
Yeah.
And and the more people I see pursuing more and more certifications, I've really tapped into something with the marketing around a lot of professional certification programs that they market to this lack or this
Yes.
deficiency you feel that I'm not enough.
So, so true. So true. It's a known thing. Like, I just want to say for folks listening who might not be in the field, it is a known thing among mental health practitioners that, like, oh yeah, we all have like about 100 online courses in our queue that we paid for and never took because we just were marketed to just like gobble them all up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I get asked the question a lot, should I get EMDR certified? And so
Yeah.
a little background on that. EMDR, there's several bodies that even offer EMDR certifications. My program is accredited through EMDRIA, the EMDR International Association. And I offer people the basic training that is the first step they would need to pursue this certification. And in terms of do I get certified or not, I just try to be very honest with people. Yes, it's an investment of more time and money. If you do the path of this education, you probably will get very good at EMDR if you
Yeah.
follow the certification route. Yet I never want anybody to feel like they have to spend even more money to
Yeah.
get good at something. Because, and the way I kind of make peace with some of my own value clashes, you can take almost anything I offer in any of my courses for free on YouTube. I give so much of my content
Yeah.
away, but unfortunately it's the piece of paper that
Yeah.
comes with the credibility, and that's in a lot of cases what you're paying for. I tell my students all the time, you can get a world-class yoga education on YouTube.
So true. Oh my gosh. Is it okay if I jump in here?
Yeah,
There's so
please.
much that I'm resonating with. The first thing is, this dips into another topic we've chatted about with privately, but um, there have been a series of documentaries about cults recently on streaming
Mm-hmm.
networks, and I've watched a lot of them and found them very, very interesting, because of all the dynamics that you're like, oh, I actually see this in my everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was watching Leah Remini's series on
Yes, great series.
Scientology, great series, there was this one part where she talks about how they hook you into this belief that you're not good enough without them and you need them, and what they dangle over you as like the carrot is a paper with some calligraphy on it. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, sounds like my certifications and my diploma and my license. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But another thing is, talking about this preying upon the I'm not good enough
Mm-hmm.
thing as a marketing tactic. And I want to leapfrog on that, that this whole like idea that only a licensed professional can help you recover from,
Right.
whatever it is that you're struggling with. When my lived experience is that I had been in therapy for years and had found it extremely helpful. And the thing that helped me to recover from the chronic migraine cycle that I had been in for 10 years, that the first and only thing that like finally shifted the dial for me was a freaking app. It was an app that I used on my own without the help
Mm-hmm.
of, I mean, there were licensed folks involved in designing that app. It's called Curable, by the way. I
Mm-hmm.
love them, so I
Awesome.
I love to recommend it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's an app. It's like educational. It was my own work on myself with the help of some education that didn't cost a whole lot of money and didn't involve sitting in a room with someone. So
Yes. So that goes to a point. Somebody earlier in our live cast here comment on it, this idea of the democratization of knowledge.
yes.
And this is an issue that's coming up a lot now in the dissociative disorders community, the plural community, as we often call ourselves, with I have to be careful, I don't go on too much of a tangent here, yet it's this self-diagnosis isn't
Oh,
relevant.
yes. Okay.
Because, and yeah, like a question, I'll just go there, that comes up a lot is, well, now so many people think they have this, you know, they have autism, they have
Right.
DID, they have this because of TikTok or because of social media. And whenever there's a conversation about the trendiness of diagnosis, my question is always, is it that there's been an up spike in trend, or is it that we're just getting better at identifying it because we're making this knowledge more accessible to people, as opposed to you have to go to a professional and pay the money. The A system, who's one of the most known DID systems on TikTok, they do just a lot of great work and advocacy, did a great video over the weekend about so many of the doctors and the experts who are saying that they know about our community are
Right.
working with people who have had the access to treatment and drawing these conclusions. What about the people who don't? And this is where, yes, I know there could be a lot of junk on social media, on apps, whatnot, but overall, I feel it has made psychology more public. And I really love this term public psychology that I've learned
I
about,
love that.
because pop psychology can get a bit of a bad name. And yeah, I think we do have to be discerning to know that anybody can put out anything on social media. Yet by and large, I think social media and YouTube and the apps and what we're doing here has been good for not just
Yeah.
the democratization of knowledge, but putting power back into the hands of people where it belongs.
Absolutely. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And there's such a difference between protecting the public from disinformation on the one
Mm-hmm.
side, which sure, I'm in favor of
Mm-hmm.
that, versus telling folks that only the professionals know anything and you don't know anything, and you know using what you're learning to help you better understand your own lived
Mm-hmm.
experience is not is garbage because a licensed professional hasn't signed off on it. And I think the latter is so damaging and disempowering.
Agreed. Uh, Agreed. And I know for me, the only way I still feel okay about operating in this space as somebody who does make money on doing this is to know that I am putting out so much of my content in an accessible way,
Yeah,
because we have to be able to do that. There's no easier way I could say
I totally agree.
that.
um I feel like we could go on for days and days talking
We
about this,
can.
but and we probably should revisit because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah. And I do want
Um,
to
yeah,
mention a comment. Hi, my friends, the Garden System, are here. And they said it makes sense that in a world of free information that people are able to advocate for themselves instead of being labeled a hypochondriac.
yes, absolutely.
And I also love, there was this meme, that went around years ago. I'm like, oh, this just nails it. That whole, I know we've seen this. Don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. And the comeback to that is, don't um, confuse the 1 hour of lecture you had on it in your graduate training with my lifetime of living with it.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Right?
Or even, included in that could be like the millions of articles that I've read that I found via Google. Why
Mm-hmm.
not?
Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting times in our field. I think that
Yeah,
the field has gone through multiple evolutions. And the other point I feel we do have to wrap up with, because I love truth bombing this,
yeah.
is healing was not invented with professional Western psychology or medicine.
Thank you.
And yes, like even mainstream graduate training and mainstream education focuses on like the advances of the last 2 centuries and how it really brought the profession into existence. But this is why in Dissociation Made Simple, I felt it was important to interview Indigenous practitioners to
Yeah.
see, what is your take on this thing we call dissociation? What is your take on this thing called healing? Because healing is not a modern invention. On the contrary.
It's not even an invention. invention, period. Like an organic process that has been studied over a long, long, long time, way before modern licensure. And those experiences and that knowledge has been passed on, but it's an organic process.
Yeah. And I just love how one of the contributors in Dissociation Made Simple, who is a depth psychologist trained in a Jungian tradition, he's also an Ecuadorian shaman, trained and ordained in the traditions of his people. And he said, yeah, my shaman, my master, he wouldn't even know what a brain is, what a brain scan is.
Yeah.
Yet he is no less a healer. I mean, he if anything, I think he has more insight into the depth and soul and humanity of what people are coming with. Yet in this modern world, we're so entrenched now in, well, show me in the neuroscience, show me in the numbers, show me in this. And I don't want to impugn people who feel that that's helpful, because a lot of people have said, well, being able to have the neuroscience explained to me helps me feel like I'm not crazy. Yes. I get that. Yeah, I definitely get that. It's the supremacy of it that I am concerned with.
You and I are so on the same page about so many things in this area, and I love talking with you about it. It gets me very excited. I think what I am coming away from our conversation today with is, like, I don't necessarily care if, like, licensure continues or doesn't, or if it changes, or I think the focus is on self-empowerment is what leads to healing. And what facilitates that best is different for each and every person. And if it's working with a licensed professional, that's great. But it's about the reverence that gets placed on that authority signifier that can really go askew.
Agreed. I think that's a good wrap-up point and a good place for further discussion and a place for further introspection for anybody who's listening to this either live or on the recording. That what is my relationship with authority? Because what's fascinating for me, I don't know how much I've even told you about this, but I came out of two pretty high control religions, and then even as part of that recovery, I ended up practicing yoga and also in an ashram that had a lot of the same high control dynamics, where the institution, the leader, the guru is put up on a pedestal. And I think you and several others have read my recent piece about a myonotherapy cult. Yeah. And I think as therapists, we have to look at some of how has our traditional relationship with authority, maybe in a religious or spiritual context, also impacted how we see these dynamics within the field. And is the overall problem of society that we've been told you need somebody on a pedestal above you.
Yeah, and it's really baked into every arena that we've ever experienced. It's infused into how we understand family, how we understand school, work, all of it. And I think it's so important to deconstruct it.
And I really like your descriptor, baked in. It's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Because once something's baked in, it's impossible to separate or tease out. Yet I think we're up to the challenge, right?
Agreed. I love talking with you. I can't wait to do it again sometime soon.
I love talking with you. Thanks for the openness to the dialogue. Thanks to what you do. And yes, whether you joined us live or are watching this later on the recording, we thank you for listening to us and hope that you continue to have these conversations in your circles.
Yes. And also would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on it. So if you want to send us, either of us a message or leave a comment, I'm super curious about all the way your minds are all working on this topic.
Great. Have a good rest of your day, my friend.
You too.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.